I have known Reverend Dr. Isaac Mills-Owoo since my preteen years, when he was a trumpeter with Joyful Way. He later became its full-time president, still the only person to have served in that capacity in the group's 50-year history. I have grown to know and appreciate him and the work he does. And it is my honor and privilege to write a short review of his book with a double-barrel title, A Theology of Marriage and Family, a Challenge to Same-Sex Relationships. He opens the book with a salvo of an epilogue that compares the new notions of marriage with the traditional notion of a union between a man and a woman, with producing counterfeit currency and adulteration. He presents the attempt to give legal recognition to civil unions and domestic partnerships as a conduit for creating grounds for recognizing same-sex marriages. Why would you not read this book? In chapter 1, he sets out to define the diversity of marriages and families and their respective cultural contexts. He identified what is considered traditional, that which is defined in geographical, religious, and cultural contexts by generations who considered the pros and cons before arriving at those definitions. Hence, it is unacceptable for any group of persons to purport a redefinition without clear and convincing arguments. How does he do this? By the book. Read it. In chapter 2, he tackles humanity's sexuality, a topic you are not likely to hear of from several pulpits. Whilst conceding that the origins of humanity are somewhat a mystery, he misses no words in describing the theories of evolution and the Big Bang as falling short of providing humanity's authentic origin. He boldly asserts that what science has so far failed to prove, theology has incontrovertibly provided through a set of faith-based principles. He does not stop there. He opines that human sexuality must be understood in the light of a myriad of influences, including the biological, sociological, and psychological. Thus, whilst delving into Balswick and Balswick's 4 dimensions of human sexuality, the author admits that sometimes nature presents some confusion, such as the occurrence of hermaphrodites, and how medical science has struggled to deal with it. How does he do that? By the book. Read it. He also identifies how people sometimes behave in a manner that is contrary to cultural expectations, and asks whether such behavior is from the creator or a biological malfunction. While admitting that a large proportion of what is considered sexuality results from biological factors, he points out that sexuality is also learned, and that cultural attitudes towards sex play a major role in forming a person's sexuality. He therefore concedes that sexuality may be explained from nature, nurture, or divine origin. But he does not accept that human choices are based only on biological, sociocultural, and psychological factors. He posits that there are spiritual dimensions and implications too, and that the choice that humans receive from a biblical perspective includes a choice, a sexual choice that resides in the familial and cultural context. How does he do this? By the book. Read it. From chapter 3, where the author examines or begins to examine the authenticity of sexuality and marriage, he makes the inevitable dive into the Bible and his viewpoint, and the distinction between the male and female in the creation story. He calls it sexual differentiation within the unity of humanity. The author then lances a boil, literally. He calls the traditional subordination of the female to the male preposterous. Preposterous. Big word. I read for my thesaurus and discovered synonyms like outrageous, ridiculous, ludicrous, laughable, and silly. Strong word. His point is that the role of the woman as a helper is not subservient, but it complements and corresponds to the man in mutuality. Why? How? By the book. Read it. The author then states that there's an intricate connection between sexuality and spirituality. Sexuality and spirituality? Whoa. Why did I think that these are opposite concepts, and that while spirituality is taking us to heaven, the weapons of this other warfare are carnal? But the author criticizes the imbalance between the two, as found in some churches and church writings. He excoriates the caricaturizing, I've written big words I can't read. He excoriates the caricaturizing of women as evil beings out to entice men to do evil. He sees sexuality as part of God's creative act and mentions how the Bible frequently employs the male and female relationship to illustrate God's relationship with Israel, and sometimes, in his words, in very exotic and suggestive language. I can assure you that the author referred to the book of Hosea as one example of the use of that imagery, but I can think of others. The Romantic Solomon provides some serious raps for young couples. So he says, The man says to the lady, like a lily among thorns is my darling among all the maidens. Whoa, lily among thorns, darling among the ladies. To which she responds, and like an apple tree among the forest is my beloved among young men. I sit in his shade, and his fruit is sweet to my taste. Talk of cultivating agricultural and agronomic raps. So the breakfast rap, you are the only sugar in my tea, isn't really far off the pace, the biblical pace. But does the author also really cite and quote biblical portions with the exotic and suggestive language? By the book. Read it. With the fall of humanity came the perversion of sexuality, so that what was meant to be a beautiful expression of spirituality is now distorted and warped, the author writes. He's quick to add that part of Christ's redemptive work is to restore sexuality to what God meant it to be. How does Christ restore sexuality? By the book. Read it. In chapter 6, he tackles the vexed issue of the authenticity of sexuality and same-sex relationships in a manner that does not mince words or shy away from his firm view on the matter. He asks whether, quote, same-sex couples can practice true commitment, grace, empowerment, and intimacy needed for expressing authentic sexual relationships. And if they can, should their unions be ratified as authentic marriages for any society, unquote. He then sets out to answer these questions by considering a gamut of relationships and their implications for society. The details in the book. Buy it. Read it. This author has a unique writing style that ends each chapter with a ponder point, which captures the pith of his point and argument. It does not just close a chapter and introduce the reader to the next chapter. It is a roadmap and signpost that leaves the reader with something to linger on, something to chew on as you read the next chapter. In this way, he creates a seamless link between the chapters as they almost morph into each other. In just 118 pages of text, divided into 7 chapters, the author addresses several traditional, cultural, and societal issues from his understanding of what constitutes the biblical perspective of them. He's not shy to admit that these are his opinions based on the materials he cites, in part on the portions of scripture he sets out, and also in part his personal convictions arising from them. The font style and size are easy on the eye, and one does not have to strain to read the book. The language is fairly simple, and the author is not given to bombastic verbose and prolix writing. He gets to the point quickly. In the footnotes and bibliography, he acknowledges his sources in a way that makes it impossible for anyone to accuse him of plagiarism. I do not know if Reverend Dr. Mills-Owoo still finds time to play the trumpet, but through this book, he has surely blown a very loud trumpet scale with twists and turns, riffs and ramps. The melodious nature or otherwise of the symphony of this trumpet best is in the eye or ears of the reader or listener. I expect that there are several parts of this book that will resonate well with the church, but as I suspect, there will be other parts that some will find difficult to accept. But that is the true value of the book. It is his honest statement on very topical and controversial issues that several will run away or shy away from, but not this author. He says it with all the conviction he can muster. It is a brave and bold book that must not only sit in your library, but must be well read, thumbed, and marked up and referred to. Buy the book, read it, make it a success, encourage the author to write again. God knows we all need material like this in times like these. Thank you.